Hello, and welcome to Cutting Through, where we present analysis of foreign policy and domestic politics that cuts through the noise of corporate and ideologically driven media. I'm Mitchell Plitnick, the president of Rethinking Foreign Policy and the author of the Cutting Through newsletter on Substack. You can subscribe to Cutting Through at mitchellplitnick.substack.com, where you can also become a paid subscriber or donate to support this work. And you can share Cutting Through with your friends and contacts. That helps a great deal as well. I had not intended to make a video tonight, but the need has become obvious. Israel launched a massive attack on the Gaza Strip in the early hours of Tuesday morning, somewhere between 2 and 3 a.m. from reports that I've gotten local time. Right now, the last I looked before making this video, the death toll was up to 80. It is certain to go much higher before this day is done, and it's very likely to balloon quickly in the coming days and weeks. Who knows how long this new wave of Israel's genocidal attack on the people of Gaza is going to last. I felt it was important to make a video right away because it was immediately obvious that the media coverage of this was just awful. The first thing I saw that just sort of caught my eye, Prem Thacker of Zateo circulated an image of the opening paragraph of a CNN report on this, and the way they described this was that this attack by Israel had thrown doubt on the fragile ceasefire. The dishonesty in there is stunning, absolutely stunning. For one thing, Israel has been committing massive violations of this ceasefire almost from the beginning, and growing throughout the period of the past almost 2 months that this ceasefire has been in place. That has included attacks on Palestinians, shooting attacks. It has included the denial of at first, the admission of fabricated housing and mobile homes that were supposed to provide temporary shelter for some of the people in Gaza. Israel never allowed that to happen. And then in more recent days, Israel has completely cut off all humanitarian aid, all electricity, everything into Gaza, just as they did at the beginning of the genocide back in October of 2023. To say that this latest attack threw doubt on a fragile ceasefire obscures the fact that Israel has been throwing doubt on the ceasefire since before the ceasefire even took effect, and that it has been doing everything it could, everything within its power, without openly defying U.S. President Donald Trump, to make life as miserable as possible for Palestinians, no regard whatsoever for international law or for basic human decency, frankly. In recent days, we've seen the ramping up of rhetoric from both Washington and Jerusalem, which has certainly been a good indication that something like what happened tonight was going to happen, where Israel just threw off all of the pretense and completely went back to the major military operations that it had been undertaking since October 2023. This was probably, in my view, timed and coordinated with the White House, considering that the United States has also been attacking Yemen at the same time, and threatening, and had just today moved to threatening Iran because of that basically that Iran, as if Iran was responsible for everything that the Houthis in Yemen do. That is a misapprehension that needs to be discussed as well, but it's not going to be my focus tonight. This was not a fragile ceasefire. This was a ceasefire that was being maintained out of absolute desperation by Hamas, not because Hamas suddenly embraces peace and is suddenly nice people or any of that stuff. And these arguments are ridiculous. Hamas is desperate. Hamas is Palestinian, and Hamas's people are starving to death and dying for lack of medical care, dying from dehydration, dying from exposure. That's aside uh, from actual damage from Israeli weapons. So Hamas really doesn't have many options. So they have been desperate to keep this ceasefire going. It's really just that simple, and that's why they have not retaliated in ways that perhaps Israel thought they might or hoped they might to Israel's violations and Israel's actions since the ceasefire began. But there's nothing new here. Israel has made it very clear that they were never going to uh, follow through with the ceasefire agreement that they signed. You know, that they actually put pen to paper and signed. Um, so it's not like this has come as a surprise, but it doesn't make it any less tragic. Seeing as I already have again the images of desperate parents carrying their children, some cases already dead, to the hospital, hoping that there can be some kind of medical care that can save their lives. It is utterly heartbreaking. To paint this as in some way Israel uh, having been forced or at least pushed into doing this by Hamas not wanting to suddenly renegotiate what was already not a very good deal. I mean, it's not like Israel hasn't been very clear, even when they claimed that they were going to see the ceasefire agreement through. They were pretty clear that what was going to happen was they were going to get the hostages out. Um, and and after that they would go after Hamas again, which means attacking Palestinian civilians. That is exactly what it has meant since October 7th, and it's what it means today. And unfortunately, that's that story is what's been subtly in some cases and implicitly in some cases reported by the Western media. The one report after another that I saw described the Israeli action tonight in Gaza as a response to Hamas's rejection of the proposals from Israel and Steve Witkoff. These proposals were intended to, as they framed it, extend phase one of this three-phase ceasefire. But what it was designed to do was simply extend it so that more hostages would be released, and yes, more Palestinian prisoners. That there would be that exchange of um, of prisoners from each side. But beyond that, it put off phase two, which is the key phase for Palestinians, because that's the phase where Israeli forces withdraw from Gaza. They start withdrawing at the beginning of phase two. By the end, they're all supposed to have withdrawn. That was what phase two was. And what the United States and Israel are trying to do is accelerate the hostage exchange part of that while basically freezing the Israeli troop withdrawal part of that. Hamas had already agreed to a deal that they knew was a bad deal, that they knew that eventually Israel would have all its hostages back, and once it did, that they were going to come right back into Gaza and start the killing again. Israel said so. It wasn't like anyone made a secret of this. It has been stated and stated by one Israeli official after another, all the way up to the prime minister. And when Israel then tried to make it even a worse deal, Hamas said, well, look, we had an agreement. Let's just stick to the agreement. That's all they said. They didn't ask to rework it to something that would be more beneficial to them. They said, let's stick to the agreement that we already have. That wasn't good enough for the United States and Israel. And so Hamas is then painted as the bad guy because they didn't want to rework an already bad agreement that Israel was already not living up to. And this is painted again implicitly in many of the reports that I've seen from the New York Times and other outlets as, if not a justification, at least a legitimate explanation for Israel's attack tonight. It just isn't the truth. And so we're back to this place, very likely. It is, of course, possible that Israel will do an attack, kill however many people that they're going to kill, destroy however much they're going to destroy, and it's just going to be for a day or two, and then they'll go back to the sort of simmering uh, hostility that existed yesterday. Maybe, but I don't think that that is something that anyone can count on. And even if it does happen that way, it's only a matter of time before this all resumes. I think that's clear. And I think we need to also be clear about something else. Because what Israel is trying to do with this attack is to move off of uh, this phased ceasefire plan that originally was the brainchild of both Netanyahu and Joe Biden. Um, they want to move off of this um, and maintain the anger and rage, particularly about the Israeli and in at least one living person's case, American, Israeli American, and some other foreign nationals, hostages in Gaza. They want that fuel for the fire. Israel is declaring with absolute clarity with this attack. They're not just out to butcher as many Palestinians as possible, regardless of their civilian or combatant status. They are eager to sacrifice their own hostages to do so. They could have had all the hostages back. They could have had it. Could have had it a year ago. We can talk about that. I mean, they could have had it more than a year ago. Offers for all the hostages being freed, all of them going in a prisoner exchange, uh, in exchange for a full Israeli withdrawal. That's been on the table since November 2023. Hamas would always have agreed to that. Okay, there's going to be people who are going to say, well, Israel shouldn't do that. This is okay. But Israel did agree to a ceasefire that was going to see the release of every single last hostage. Every one of them was going to go back home to their families. And hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, many of whom were taken just as much as hostages as the Israelis and just as illegally and are being held without charge, having done nothing, um, would have also gone home to their family. I cannot imagine, and it doesn't really matter if the family is in Jabalia, Khan Yunis, Tel Aviv, Haifa, wherever. Doesn't matter. What is it like to have a family member being held hostage in deplorable conditions? And both Palestinians and Israelis are being held in horrible conditions. One could talk about the difference in the circumstances and what each side is capable of. I'm not going there now. You have a family member that is suffering, that is alone, that is scared, that is suffering. And you would think, this is certainly has been a priority. It's been something that Hamas and other Palestinian groups over the years, including the Palestinian Authority and other groups, have worked on to try and bring their people back home. And without a doubt, most Israelis across the Israeli political spectrum want to see those hostages returned. They want to see them home with their families. And there are those Israelis, though, and unfortunately, too damn many of them are in the government, and those ones in the government are controlling the government, who don't give a damn about these people. They don't care about these hostages. They don't care about the families who are missing them, who are crying about them. And when people use those hostages as an excuse to slaughter Palestinian civilians, as we've seen since October of 2023, you're falling into the very trap that Netanyahu is setting. You're falling into exactly what Netanyahu wants you to do, because he wants those hostages in captivity so that you will support his bloodthirsty campaign. What is Netanyahu afraid of? Why doesn't he want the hostages back? Does he fear that he won't have sufficient support for a war of genocide when there's no hostages to weep crocodile tears over as he does, while his audience, whether in Israel or um, around the world, including many in Palestine that I've heard from directly, who want to see those hostages home, just as they want to see Palestinian prisoners home. It's not lost on anyone what's happening here. And yes, the right thing to do is for all illegally held prisoners to be released and sent home. That includes the ones that are still in Gaza, and that includes all the ones in Israeli prisons, the ones who we cannot get a count of because Israel holds them uh, incommunicado, in administrative detention, without charge, without access to a lawyer. We can't get a count. All of those people need to go home in the same way, because if there are many ways that we can talk about an imbalance between Israel and Palestine. Um, so much of what goes on is based on that imbalance. But there is a way in which there is balance. No balance of the overall suffering, but a parent worried about their child being held in terrible conditions in captivity. That feeling is the same wherever you are. And I think most people care deeply about that. Unfortunately, those most people are not in the Israeli government. And they are certainly not in the ruling coalition. And we need to be very clear that Israel right now is launching these attacks and they're claiming to be attacking Hamas sites. Go look at the reports. Go look at the films that are coming out of Gaza. These are civilians. And this is the same story that has been going on since October of 2023. Israel kills people, and then they say they were terrorists after the fact. If you were killed, you were a terrorist by definition. But what about the infants? Well, they were terrorists too. They maybe would have been terrorists, whatever. Maybe some are considered collateral damage. It's all nonsense. This has been, from the Israeli side, an attack uh, on civilians, just as much of October 7th was an attack on civilians. It certainly like Israel's attacks. Israel has certainly attacked Hamas sites and Islamic Jihad sites and other places where they know militants are. Palestinians did that on October 7th too, but the overwhelming and heart wrenching parts of it are where the civilians have been victims. And as always in conflict, that's where most of it happens. So again, when we're seeing how Israel launches attacks on Hamas, Israel is not launching attack tonight on Hamas. They are launching an attack as they have been since October 2023. They are launching an attack on the people of Gaza, on women, on children, on the elderly, and yes, on Palestinian men as well, some of whom are militants, some of whom can be legitimately called terrorists if you'd like. It doesn't change anything. The point is to destroy Gaza. The point is to make it so that Gaza is no longer, it's not just that it's not a threat, it's that it's no longer a home for Palestinians. That it's not livable, that they have to leave. It's not about the Riviera and the Mediterranean or silly ideas like that. Although, for Trump, maybe it is, and maybe his vision can happen someday. It can't. But this is about destroying Palestinian nationalism, and it's happening in Gaza at a massive scale, and it's ramping up in the West Bank too. We need to be aware of it. We need to stop it if we can. We need to do all we can to stop it. Because let us remember, I'm an American. I imagine many of the people watching this are Americans. This can't happen without us. It can't happen without our acquiescence. and it can't happen without our government's support in money, in arms, and in political and diplomatic interference. So we need to do something about it. Please like and subscribe. I'll be continuing to provide as much of the coverage and insight to this as I can, uh, working to give you a more grounded perspective than you're probably getting from your news shows if you're getting your news from TV, trying to look at the whole situation as in its entirety. So if you can like, subscribe, these things help. Tell your friends, donate, and it's mitchellplitnick.substack.com. You can also find these videos on YouTube, channels Cutting Through. And let's all try and just find ways to work together and just make the situation better. I don't know how much we can hope for with Donald Trump in office, but we have to do the best that we can. Thanks.